Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and today I'd like to show you how I made this card. Now this card is fiddly, there is no question about it, but I'm going to try and lead you through the process, and I've learned a little bit since I made this card, and I got this idea from this card, Curvy Gatefold card. And this was by Linda, A-A-R-H-U-S, Arhouse, I'm thinking, Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, polka dots and paper.com. And I will put the link in the video below here about how to get to her website. And she has this PDF that's downloadable from her website that shows you how she went about making this card. And her S-curve is perfect. Here she's done it again with some DSP lining the card, and then this is the money end of this PDF where she shows exactly how to cut, fold, mark your card, cut the S fold, and create a template. Now, I found it difficult to follow this exactly, so I've kind of come up with my own version of this. She used a circle die to cut out this upper piece and the lower piece here, and I found that all of our circle dies do not make a circle big enough to do this. So I ended up using an oval, which seemed to do the trick. So let me show you, we're going to do this one from start to finish on what I did to make this card. And first we're going to start with how to cut the paper. And I'm using this, it's kind of fun. This is the new purple Posey paper. That's one of the new in colors, and it's kind of a pale lavender. And you can see here, this is Highland Heather, and then this dark is Gorgeous Grape. So this makes a really nice addition to those two purples. So what you need to do to cut this paper is to set this on your trimmer, and I may have to turn this way so you can see everything here. And what we're going to do is we are going to set this piece of paper on the 8.5 inch edge at 5.5. So this is a very special card. You're only going to get one card front out of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So this one would be good to cut if you had some 12 by 12 paper to cut this, and you can get more than one that way. But if you're using an 8.5 11, you're only going to get one card out of this. Okay, so we're going to cut this at 5.5. Now I'm going to turn this back around. We want to keep this because we're going to need it for some of our other pieces here. And I'm going to set this here so you can see it. Yes, I think you can. And we are going to set this at 3 3/8 and score the card and then turn it around. I always find that I do better if I turn it around and score it exactly the same way rather than figure out the other length. So 3 3/8 on both sides. So that's what your score mark should look like on this card. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is fold this and varnish the lines. And let me get my bone folder here, and I'm going to burnish this very, very aggressively because I want this to lay just as flat as I can get it. Now you're going to notice that when we fold this across, part of what we get is an overlap in the card, and that is part of the design to get the S-curve to work. Okay, rather than using 2 or 3 pieces of paper and kind of putting things together. So there we go. So that is what our card should look like at this point. So we've got a couple pieces that we folded in. Now, what I also did was I cut this card. Well, I'll show you what I really did. I cut a template out of Thick Whisper White and went along and made a template of what it was I was going to do. And I thought I would show that. This is a piece of shimmer white because it's kind of what I grabbed. And on this one, I made my lines and then used my scissors to cut out. And on this one, I've started cutting with my craft knife, and I'm finding that I'm getting a much sharper cut. So I'm going to show exactly what it is I've done here. Now, the next thing is in the layering ovals dies, this die here. So if that's the largest, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth largest die in your layering ovals, and this one measures a tiny bit over 2 3/4 and a little bit under 2 inches. I used this die to get my S-curve. So how did I do that? The first thing I did was to close up my card here and get dead center. And I did that by measuring this. This is 4 1/4, so it's a standard size width card. So the center of this going this way is 2 1/8. So I made a mark at 2 1/8, 2 1/8, 2 1/8, and then I connected those marks and made this line. So I know that that is the center of my card. Then I turned it this way. And this is a standard card, so this is 5 1/2. So half of 5 1/2 is 2 3/4. So I marked it 2 3/4, 2 3/4, 2 3/4, and then made my mark across this way so that I have the absolute center of my card here. And I've got a good access straight across going up and down. Now, what I did was take my die and put the outer edge of it so that it hit the point here where the 2 lines cross. So I know that's dead center, and then rolled this until I pushed it in far enough and kept raising it until I finally got where the top part of my die was at the top part of the card and the bottom part of my die was at the crossing. So then I used my pencil and went around and made my line here for that part of the S-curve. Then I moved the die down here and did that same thing. Put it at the center of that point and at the bottom of my card and went around this and made my line. So that's where I am with this. Now, you can just cut that S-curve out with your scissors. I found that that was very challenging to hold your scissors so that you don't get exactly the right cut. I couldn't do it reliably. So what I did was I brought, these are the backings of some designer series paper here, and I brought them to my work surface here, and I've been using my craft knife because I feel like I can just pull that along the line on this S-curve and get a more consistent line here. So that's what I've done. And I'd already cut up this side, but I wanted to save this so you could see. And now there we go. Now I'm still going to have to, because as I run my finger along this, I can feel a couple of peaks and valleys. So what I'm going to do is fix those with my scissors and take a little point off of one spot and another. And it really, you only have to have one side cut right. The beauty of this is once you have this template made, you never have to do this part again. Okay, so there we go. So now I feel like I've got a pretty good S curve, and the way to make sure you've got a matching one on the other side is to fold this in, fold this over the top, and then cut this piece here so that it matches perfectly. Okay, and then what you can do is cut this S curve out, and I'm going to do that again using my craft knife. Okay, so there I've got my S curve cut, and I can see that I have a little bit of repair work to do on this. So again, I'll speed up the video so you're not painfully watching me clean up my S curve here. Okay, so now I have created my template here, and what I'm going to do is tape this template onto my card. I'm going to line it up the very best I can, and I'm just going to use some purple tape here to anchor the two of those pieces together. And there I've created my template. Now I'm going to draw my S curve here on my card, and now remove my template and cut my S curve. Now on this piece I am going to try and do this with scissors, and we'll see how close I get. Okay, so there we go. I've got my S curve cut out, and I can see I'm going to have to make some minor adjustments so that everything fits. Okay, now you can see these are all the little shavings that I took off, and I'm really talking about pretty minimal pieces here to take off of that, but I'd rather cut it so that I had to take some off rather than ending up with too big a gap to start with. So once I've got it trimmed down to where I need, then on this piece I have to decide in the future whether, when I make my template and draw it, whether I want to cut on the inside or the outside of the pencil line. And that will help you determine how closely this is set up. Now I'm going to go around the edge here and remove my pencil marks. And some of you have already decided this is almost too much trouble to mess with, but it's such a pretty card. I thought I would just share it with you, and then you can decide whether or not it's something you want to try and tackle. And what I would say is, with this card, take your time. Making small cuts and getting this exactly the way you want it is going to save you, rather than get going a little bit too fast and then not be happy with the results. Okay, so there we go. That's the hard part. And then I would save my template, and if I wanted to make more cards, then use this template over and over again. In fact, I think I'll probably make 3 or 4 templates if I decide to use this in a card class, and see how many people will come back to my card class. Okay, so here we are. We've got our base cut. The rest of this is actually pretty easy. So I've used a little bit of Gorgeous Grape, and then I have used some more of this pretty purple Posey, and I used Call Me Clover as as my green here because I loved the idea of the darker purple with the darker green. It just was stark and contrast and just lots and lots of fun. And then I have some Highland Heather here. And the punches that I used were the sprig punch to get the pieces around here. I used the 4-petal punch which goes with the stamp set Pop of Petals. Here's the Pop of Petals. And I used this stamp here. Then for my sentiment, I used a Hostess set. You can use anything you'd like. This one said, Dear Friend, and that's the one I used from here, but it can say Happy Birthday, it can say Thank You. This one says, For You, Happy Birthday. One of the best things in life is you, and you're a blessing. And then for the sentiment, I used the smallest of the oval framelets here to put my Dear Friend, and then I used the second largest of the scallops so that I would have a nice big frame around that Dear Friend. Then the other thing I used, and these are on the clearance rack right now, is I used this itty bitty punch pack, and I used this to cut out some of my little flowers. So let's just get going here, and I'll show you what I did to, the rest of the card is really pretty easy. It's layers and it's little bits and pieces, but not terribly taxing. And then I used a piece of Whisper White for the inside. And let's see, this piece that I used was, let me just measure this, 3 3/4 by 4 7/8. And so I thought it fit nicely with a little border in there, and then I could add all 3 colors of the purple to make my flowers. So what I did was I used my darkest of the inks, which is the Gorgeous Grape, and let me move some of these things out of the way. And I did some stamping here. I first of all stamped my flower here, and I've marked mine so that the top is marked here, so I know how to stamp that towards the edge of the paper so that it's easy to cut out of the punch, because it's not all the petals are the same size. So punching or stamping here and just all along the edge here. And then I did exactly the same thing on my Gorgeous Grape. So this one is more tone on tone. Just make sure you've got plenty of ink on that stamp. And then I have a piece of this pretty purple Posey, and I'm going to put some pieces on this, some stamps on this as well. Isn't that pretty? This is going to be a new favorite of mine, I can tell. As much as I'm going to miss the lemon lime twist, I'm really pleased with having this color. Did you see the lemon lime twist paper is all gone already? I missed that opportunity. There we go. So we've got a few of those punched and we're ready to go. And then here's my punch, and we're going to come in here, and this was punched so that this will go right in to the right place on this punch, and get these marked out. And I've already punched a bunch of these. So I've got my dark purples. It looks like maybe I need another medium purple, so I'm going to do that. And get one more of these punched out. Then we need a bunch of these little flowers, and the ones I used had the most definition around the flower. So I need a bunch of these, and so I'm going to punch out just a whole fistful of these little flowers. Going to need some of the darker purple. I keep moving this out of the way. And so I'm going to also punch out a whole bunch of these. Again, I always like to have more rather than not enough, because you know how things disappear on your desk. And then also I'm going to punch out a fistful of these flowers as well. And the way I'm doing these, I'm just using this particular shape, but you can certainly mix and match, and there's 3 choices for the kinds of flowers. On this one, I think I'll just use these because I like how spiky they are. And then I have one more bit of stamping to do on this, where I'm going to stamp my dear friend, and then I will die cut that piece out and cut out my frame out of the darker purple. Okay, so here we go, dear friend, and I'm putting that on the edge, but far enough in that I can get my die set around it. So here is my die ready to go there. And get that set. And this time I think I'm going to cut out my scalloped piece out of the darker purple and die cut that as well. Okay, so here we have our card base, we have our flowers, we have our sentiment, and the only thing left is a handful of these sprigs, and I'm going to go ahead and punch out several of these sprigs, and I have several set aside here that are ready to go. All right, so here are the extras that I have cut. And I think we are ready to go to assemble this card. Okay, so here we have all of our pieces, and we have our card base. So the first thing we can do is adhere this piece to the inside of our card. All right, I'm going to just put a little bit of snail around the edge of our layering piece here. And put that into place on the inside of our card. There we go. And then on this piece, what I've done is I took the darkest purple piece, a medium color piece, and since this is a 4-petal flower, I decided that the smart thing to do would be to just put it 2/3 of the way here on top of the other one, so that I would have room enough to add my 3rd layer here on top and be able to see all of the petals all the way around. And one of the things that I used as additional decoration on this was this Happiness Blooms enamel dots, and I used these pretty yellow centers, and I'm happy to tell you that this looks like it's carrying over in the new catalog. So I'm going to take the largest of the yellow centers and put it on this one, and then I'm going to take a couple of these sprigs. I don't think I used any of them whole. And just attach them to the back of this so that I can put it in my card here. And I put some snail on the back of these and just had them poke out a little bit here just to add some greenery to this on a couple of the sides here. There we go, like that. And then because this is the inside of the card and I didn't want any more dimension, I just put my snail on and I put my flower right down here at the bottom, made sure that it isn't interfering with the closing of the card, and there is the interior of my card done. Okay, now what's left to do is to create these little arrangements here on the front, and this requires only adding this piece to the border here, trying to get that centered. And then I did raise that one on dimensionals, but you'll notice I put a couple of the sprigs, so I'm going to take another of these sprigs and just cut off the very bottom, and then put a couple of these sprigs on the back of this. So I'm going to put a tiny bit of snail on the top and the bottom just to hold my leaves, and put my sprigs in place back behind my sentiment here. There we go. And then I'm going to add some dimensionals here. In this one, you can see I put the card together this way. So this sentiment is going to go on this side this time. So right here, centered, my dear friend sentiment, and that's pretty straight. And so then the next thing I'm going to do is create my larger flower down here, and then create my little 3 cluster up here. And what I did for those is I took those little flowers, and you can do it on your pierce mat. I just did it in the palm of my hand just to give those little flowers a little bit of dimension here. So I'm going to set up that 3 cluster on the top across from my sentiment right here, and use a little bit of these sprigs to put that in place. And I used glue dots to put these little flowers down. So now creating this large flower element here, what I did was I used my bone folder to give these flowers some dimension, and I pinched them in a little bit and folded them, and these you can beat up a lot just so that they have a little bit of dimension and don't look quite so flat. And then I'm putting these on a dimensional. So I'm going to put my dimensional in place on the bottom there, and then put my other flowers on top. Arranging them so that I see all 3 colors of purple. And then in the new catalog, we have these 3-dimensional flower centers. and they're little, I'll bring it up so you can see it. They're, I don't know what they are, but they've got little yellow fuzzy stuff on them. And there's a glue dot on the back. So I'm going to take off that cover, and this one looks like it needs a little bit of a trim. He's not round. And I'm going to place that right smack in the middle of my little flower cluster here. And then to the back of this, I'm going to add some sprigs here. And then my cluster of flowers right in here. Isn't that pretty? So I'm going to peel the back of this off now and put that into place here. And then I also took some of these smaller flowers and put those around the larger flower on both sides. Okay, so there we have just about finished with this card. You may notice on this card that I put a little bit of extra dimension around this by sponging around the edge, and I'm going to do that again. And so I've got a sponge dauber here, and I've got my Gorgeous Grape, and I think for this one it really did give it a nice finishing touch. So I sponged around the whole card here on the front, the S curve and the top edge, and down the fold as well. Now you have to remember this is a handmade card, so the cutting isn't perfect, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's definitely different, and thanks to Linda Arhouse, who came up with this wonderful idea. So there is the project and our card for the day. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I do so appreciate it. I'm just going to burnish these edges down one more time to get them to sit closed a little bit better. There we go. And I think it's a real different card, a different kind of fold than I've seen any place else. And what we really need is a die that makes that S-curve for us. But I don't have such a thing. So I used what I do have here, and I'm really pretty pleased with it. So thanks again for stopping by. I do so appreciate it. And we have a few days left in April, and my prize draw for placing an order on my website, www.lbedinger.stampinup.net, or you can get to it through my blog, www.inkandingenuity.com, is the Amazing Life Bundle, which is the stamp set Amazing Life and then the stitched rectangle framelit dies. So a lovely prize, and all you have to do is put an order on my website of any amount and you're automatically in the drawing. So thanks again for stopping by, and I'll be back soon with more cards and more projects and more tip videos. Bye.